Yeah, look, we're in conversation with major American companies now that are either in Venezuela or, in the case of Citgo, here in the United States. I think we're trying to get to the same end result here. You know, Venezuela is one of the three countries I call the troika of tyranny. It'll make a big difference to the United States economically if we could have American oil companies really invest in and produce the oil capabilities in Venezuela. It'd be good for the people of Venezuela. It'd be good for the people of the United States. We both have a lot at stake here, making this come out the right way.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Good.
Good.
We need to talk about Venezuela again.
Yeah.
We didn't solve that problem. Matter of fact, there's lots of things brewing down there. Our favorite bureaucrat, John Bolton, is down there with a lot of mischief trying to stir things up. And he is pretty bold. I think I'm going to call him Bold Bolton. He is bold.
Yeah.
And it's not like some of this stuff is secret. I mean, he's right out in the open. And the president's been out in the open. I mean, he vacillates and go back and forth, but on this whole idea that when we take over a country, it shouldn't cost us anything. We just take their oil.
Yeah.
And this is what Bolton had to talk about, you know, is taking over the finances. And it may more or less has made the declaration, not only that Maduro is no longer president, but that all the control of the finances in the United States hand, and we will direct it, we'll freeze it, we'll do whatever we want because we're in charge now. We own Venezuela, is what they're saying. And it seems like even the anti-Maduro people should resent that a little bit, especially if they know anything about current history, because most of the time these idealistic programs, we're going in there to spread democracy, enforce their constitution and all this stuff, they have to realize that that's a lot of talk, but they go along with it because we hate this one guy enough. But I think it plants seeds of further trouble. You know, they can try to justify it. You know, we have to stop terrorism, we have to stop communism. Who knows what their argument is? And human rights. And most of the time that never happens, makes things worse. And I think that is what's happening here. But it looks like we are determined. I think one of the most interesting things, and I'm sure you'll give us your opinion on this, is, you know, when that press conference ended and Bolton was there, that all of a sudden he's carrying this pad out, 5,000 troops to Colombia. And you get to thinking, is that a message? Is he stupid? Is he just plain out evil? Is this a warning or what? And I can't figure it all out which one's worse, because it's probably a little bit of all of it. But to me, I don't believe that can be an accident.
Yeah, that definitely doesn't seem to be. You know, someone wrote an article, I think we put it up, I don't remember, a couple of days ago, but they referred to Pompeo, Bolton, and Abrams as the Pirates of the Caribbean, which I think is pretty accurate. And Bolton essentially just said it. He says, what we want to do is get American companies in there working on the oil, pumping the oil. Never mind the fact that the Venezuelans have deals with the Chinese to do it, deals with the Russians to do it. The U.S. is just going to come in and cancel those deals. I guess they assume that these other countries are going to sit by and watch. The Chinese are in for $50 billion in loans to the Venezuelans over the past 10 years or so. So I guess they feel that China's just going to sit by and write off that $50 billion. But just to come in and take over your oil is blatant. And I guess you got to admire his moxie, his chutzpah, because he's not talking about human rights that much. He's just saying, hey, we're going to get your oil. What's the big deal? And, of course, this morning Pompeo authorized Guaido, who is the U.S. Chosen president, the president we selected for Venezuela, authorized him to take control of all U.S.-held Venezuelan oil assets, which are significant. It's significant. It's going to put billions of dollars in the hands of Guaido and the so-called opposition of Venezuela. And I think it ratchets up the coup, and it's probably going to be dangled in front of some of those senior military officials as well in Venezuela to try to break some of those away, which is key to this thing going through.
I wonder if Bolton is ever bothered by, the fact that most of the world at least says taking other people's stuff is theft. But in this category, as we have complained so often, when government performs acts that we ourselves consider illegal and theft and monstrous as individuals, that too many Americans concede that governments can do it. So this is the case. He would have no remorse whatsoever. This is a moral imperative that you use your military strength to impose their will, even if it involves killing and murder and wars. That it never bothered him. I mean, just think of the atrocious statements made over the years about people dying in bombing, like with Madeleine Albright, and how many people die over these things. It doesn't bother him. It's amoral, and I think here, okay, we're going to take their oil and we're going to threaten with 5,000 troops. Quite frankly, if we decided that we were going to just go over there and militarily take them over, 5,000 troops in Colombia is probably not very necessary. I mean, we have all. But I think it's just threats, intimidation, trying to scare this guy away and capitulate and turn everything over to the United States. But there are more factors now than in the old days when we'd go into South America, and you mentioned them already with China, and Russia has concerns. So I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk.
I think that's absolutely true. And there was a couple pieces have been written by when the Vice President Pence and when Pompeo, when they decided to recognize Guaido as the president and essentially openly endorse regime change. I've seen several articles that say that the Pentagon wasn't involved in the planning. The military wasn't involved in the planning, even though the word was all options on the table, i.e. military. And it's interesting because Venezuela, as we talked about before the show, is no Panama. It's a country the size of Texas with 30 million people, with lots of jungles for guerrilla warfare. This is more like a Vietnam than a Panama. So they're certainly getting into something more. You talked about Albright's quote. Here's a good quote from Bolton, talking about why he dodged Vietnam service. He said, "I'm not going to go die in some rice paddy, but he's more than happy to send many others to die." The Colombia thing we should return to just for a second, though. He has this yellow legal pad. He's got 5,000 troops to Colombia. Was it an operational security flaw, breach? Did he mess up and show his personal notes? I think I would tend to side with what you said. This is a psychological operation. This is a message to Maduro that we mean business. What's interesting, that shows how Bolton and the neocons view our allies, though, because it really puts the Colombian government in a bad position if you think about it. Because all of a sudden the world is saying, hey, what's going on? Colombia said, no, we don't know anything about it. It really puts them in a very uncomfortable position of, hey, do you have some kind of secret deal with the U.S.?
We live at a time where the rule of law means very little. And let's say this is a very serious breach of protocol and has undermined our protections and revealed something he shouldn't have. But I think Hillary was involved in a little bit of that too. So much. I don't think that even enters their mind. I don't think that people even care about it. And that's very secondary, unless maybe they can use it politically to punish somebody they don't like. They might come up with this. But that's certainly what seems to be the problem, though, that we don't know exactly who in thunder's doing all this. But I'll tell you what. I think the real planners are the victors right now, seem to be those who pull the strings behind the scenes, the neocons. The neocons are in charge, and they are the swamp. So someday we're all going to have to dissect this out and decide, who exactly is involved in the swamp, and who is really sincere in getting rid of it, and is it going to be that if you're not consistent in it, that you'll lose credibility, or will you always have credibility no matter what? Play games with them. Sometimes I do what the neocons tell me. Sometimes I don't. And that to me is just a mess, because they're too close to the administration. So it might be, well, I have to go along, or I'd be in for big trouble. We do nothing if we don't go along. They'll impeach me. Well, they're trying to do that anyway. anyway. So he hasn't gained much by compromising on this.
No, and he has some fair weather friends in Pelosi and the others. But, you know, the neocons are great flatterers. And I think, you know, I don't want to do a pop psychology with Trump, but I suspect that he's susceptible to such flattery. And I think George W. Bush was as well. So I can imagine the scenario where this was sold to Trump on Trump's own terms. Mr. President, we're going to go down to Venezuela. They got a bad guy running the country. We're going to go down there. We're going to liberate the people, but we're also going to get the oil to pay for it all. You know, and he's going to say, oh, that sounds like a pretty good deal.
Well, he preached that in his campaign.
Openly,
he says that was the big problem in the Middle East. It wasn't the aggression that we were committing, but it was the cost and not doing the job and not paying for it. And that's the same thing with NATO. He never saw NATO like we see NATO as an international government, abusive government, and yet NATO. What they claimed yesterday, they collected how many hundreds of billions, a lot of money that Trump made them pay. I wonder if it's in the bank yet. I just have a suspicion that was just PR.
I don't even think NATO's funded that way. There's not a sort of a central bank at NATO. It's each individual country with their own military.
All of a sudden they coughed up these billions of dollars when they're all broke.
And, you know, we put up a piece on the Ron Paul Institute, ronpaulinstitute.org, from the Greystone Project, and it's a great article written by Max Blumenthal and Dan Cohen, doing some old-fashioned investigative reporting, which is so sorely needed these days. But they went back and they looked at the history of not only Juan Guaido, but the political party that he formed. It's fascinating. First of all, before January 22nd, when he, at the suggestion, the strong suggestion of Pence, declared himself president, before that date, according to polls in Venezuela, less than 20% of Venezuelans had ever even heard of him. Forget support or whatever, they'd never heard of him. The last time he actually ran for office at all was in 2015, and he got some 90,000 votes. He wasn't even voted in office. He was never elected president of the National Assembly. He was never elected speaker. It was a rotating presidency that his party was set to achieve. So his democratic legitimacy as a president, even according to the Article 233 of the Venezuelan Constitution, is on very, very, very thin ice.
You know, you say the people didn't know much about him, hadn't heard about him, but I think the CIA has heard about him. The CIA checked him out, and he's been approved by the CIA. There is no way these commitments that we have made, the American people allowed our government to make commitments and without checking them out and with full control. So it's another CIA operation, and I imagine the CIA sometimes can generate crowds. Even though there's big crowds, I'll bet there's a lot of people, maybe they didn't know Guaido, but there's a lot of people who are probably very unhappy. That's a miserable place, you know, when they have this runaway inflation and all these things. So it's easy to energize people like that and get them out. But I think the organization is sort of like, I often wonder how they organize these caravans of immigrants coming our way, because I don't think that's really all that spontaneous. And I think some of those crowds just didn't pop up. Oh, okay, there's going to be a big crowd down there, and we're going to. I think our CIA is not the most trustworthy group of people, except they try, unless they're working for themselves.
Well, in fact, we don't even have to speculate about their involvement with the CIA. And here's another reason why they hate Assange. WikiLeaks has revealed internal memos from the U.S. Embassy in Caracas back to Maine State in Washington back in 2007. Guaido and this whole group that what later became the political party, the Popular Will Party, all of these people were taken to Belgrade, Serbia in 2005 and were given the same training in regime change that a lot of the other color revolutions that we've seen. They were student leaders at the time. They were taken, they were funded by the National Endowment for Democracy, which is the U.S.'s regime change organization funded by the government, also funded by the CIA. They were with Otpor and Canvas, which are the groups that train these people. They were sent back home after this training. They became known as the Generation of '07. They started launching some pretty violent protests, and in fact, the head of the party that Guaido was in has been under house arrest because they participated in 2017 in street riots where several people were killed. So these people were all trained in regime change tactics by Washington, by the National Endowment for Democracy, the CIA. So this is really the more in Blumenthal, hats off to Blumenthal and Cohen, because they really uncovered. Look at the article, click on the links. Don't take my word for it in terms of this summary. They really dot the I's and cross the T's.
That's right. And the truth is out there. A few of them can dig it out. The big job is spreading this around. But, you know, if the American people were asked to reveal their images and their understanding of foreign governments getting involved in somebody else's election, and they were on a scale to 1 to 100, who was the most ruthless in getting involved in interfering in election, I believe that it would be overwhelmingly it's the Russians. It's the Russians have gotten involved. And if you compare that to how many times we have participated in coups, and even this out in the open, they'd probably say, oh, well, this is different. This is different. So that is where the real problem is, a understanding of the principles and the morality of a non-interventionist foreign policy and the impracticality of it. You know, it doesn't work and it costs a lot of money. It makes more enemies. And, you know, it leads to no good. And yet the people, you know, there were no qualms about us marching into Panama, you know, in 1989 and taking out Noriega. Yeah. So, and this is the way this would be. People aren't going to do it. But thank goodness there are a couple people out there. But what do they do? What do they do with a guy like Assange? He's the greatest criminal there is. Yeah. You know, he's not even an American citizen, and yet he has committed the most vicious treason ever, and we have to punish him, you know, for life. You know, and people call for his death penalty. Yeah. So truth is a very, very powerful tool, but it's also one that the tyrants, they have to squelch it because their exposure will destroy them. You don't need an atomic bomb to destroy them. You just need to reveal the truth and it will be destroyed. So that is why the Assanges of the world are probably, and other individuals who will reveal the truth, why they are so valuable. And, you know, we even had our program once on all the truth tellers, you know, at our convention. And they're very, very important people. But it is a struggle. And I think that's really our job, the best we can do it. Imperfectly, absolutely, but I think exposing the truth is the #1 job we have, and encourage other people to do the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Dr. Paul hit it absolutely on the head. This time is different. They lied about Iraq, they lied about Syria, they lied about Yemen, they lied about Afghanistan, they lied continuously in these regime changes, but they'll say, oh, but this time is different, this time is different, this one will work, this will be something different. That's why I always really urge people, okay, it's great to oppose war, but oppose war propaganda. They want us to say certain things to grease the skids, to grease the wheels, to move the machine forward. You know, my good friend and mentor Lou Rockwell always tells me, I refuse to say anything bad about a regime the government wants to kill, the U.S. government wants to kill, because I don't want to participate in the war propaganda. And I think that's a good thing to keep in mind. War propaganda greases the skids for war and is just as dangerous as war.
You know, they're always trying to grab the moral high ground, no matter how evil they are and no matter what kind of a war they're trying to start. And this is we've mentioned this, and has already been given as an excuse for us to go in there. We need to go into Venezuela to enforce and save the Venezuelan Constitution. Can you believe the arrogance of that? At the same time, we disobey, totally ignore our own Constitution to go and pretend that we're going to enforce this Constitution because we're going to go down there and steal the oil. I mean, such hypocrisy. I just think it's tragic that more people don't say, hey, wait a minute, how many lies can you people tell? But, you know, the driving force is that there is, and because I've experienced it, I know about it, we all have a desire to want to like our country, but we shouldn't equate that with liking our government and liking bad policy. You know, liking our country and our values and the Constitution is one thing, but this whole thing that we went in there to save the Venezuelan Constitution by abusing our Constitution is just ludicrous. That is why we need more truth tellers, and the more we find, the better off we'll be, because that is what will help us move toward a peace and prosperity society. Thank you for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.